Well, hello, people. It is Alicia Couri here, the Red Carpet CEO and your Audacious Confidence Growth Expert. And I'm here to influence, educate, inspire, and entertain you so you can step into what's possible for you, step boldly into what's possible for you in your life, and live the life that you always dreamt about. So I am here with another really powerful episode of the Audacious Confidence Show in light of everything that's going on right now. I have my guest tonight, and I want to bring him on quickly because we got a lot to talk about. And because his bio is so extensive, I'm not going to do a monologue because I need to have time to read his extensive bio to you. And I know he's probably laughing in the green room at me, but I want to share who my guest is. His name is Dr. Jarret Patton, and he has been a guest on this show before, but talking about something very, very similar but different. Dr. Jarret Patton, MD, has served thousands of children in Eastern Pennsylvania for over 15 years. Throughout his career as a pediatrician and medical director, he remained an advocate for children's health issues. Over time, his servant leadership led him to curtail clinical practice to become a change agent in the healthcare system. As a former president of the medical staff at an 8-hospital system in Eastern Pennsylvania, he worked with other leaders to promote children's health and health equity in a highly matrixed environment. Additionally, he has advised many regional and national organizations, including the Joint Commission, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Hospital Association. Dr. Jarret is well published in the medical literature and contributed to books primarily in the areas of general pediatrics, cultural competency, and health equity. His award-winning and #1 best-selling book, Licensed to Live, A Primer to Rebuild Your Life After Your Career is Shattered, demonstrates through faith, resilience, and perseverance, job titles are only temporary, while greatness is achieved through the individual. The success of his book prompted him to start an interview-style podcast, also entitled License to Live. His Facebook Live show, 2 Cents Tuesdays with Dr. Jarret, keeps him true to his pediatric roots, engaging parents on his Dr. Jarret Facebook fan page, along with his latest best-selling book, Whose Bad Blank Kids Are Those? I ain't gonna say it because it was all asterisked out. A Parent's Guide to Behavior for Children of All Ages. He received a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Xavier University of Louisiana and his medical degree from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. He completed his pediatric residency at New York University and Bellevue Hospitals. Dr. Jarret is the founder and CEO of Dr. Jarret PLCC, a firm which helps educate, enlighten, and improve healthcare. He does this through his books, coaching programs, media appearances, and public speaking. And he has a new book that's coming out pretty soon, which we'll talk about during this interview. But I would love to welcome to the show once again back Dr. Jarret Patton. And I have to stop moving.
Hey.
Listen, that was such a mouthful.
Yeah, you gave me an introduction. It sounded like a sermon almost. So thank you very much, Alicia.
Listen.
Thank you for having me back on your show.
I had to give you your props, sir.
Keep it official. Keep it official.
So I want to, first of all, because you are a pediatrician, and the reason I first reached out to you was to have a conversation over the current pandemic and how it's affecting children, and then other things broke loose. So we're going to start where I wanted to start with, and our first segment we're going to talk about this current pandemic, COVID, and how it's showing up for children, since children are your heart and soul, and you really love to serve that community, parents helping their children. So my first question is, how do you see now we're seeing all these different symptoms that are happening with children. What exactly is that?
Yes. So COVID has been a continually developing situation out there, and we have been trying to study and follow and see what's going on. And early on in this, even when it was still over in Europe and Asia, we knew that children weren't as severely as affected as the elderly, for instance. So children may get some mild fever, they may have some cough, some mild respiratory issues, and nothing too much more significant than what you would expect with maybe the flu or some other less severe virus. But with time, enough children had COVID that we found a additional syndrome that we're finding with kids that we've seen with other viruses in the past. It is a syndrome like Kawasaki syndrome, and that usually has some rash, some internal inflammation. It can affect the heart directly, and it can be very, very severe in children. We do know that there's some treatment for it. We do know that there's some options out there. But what I want you guys to know before we get in the nitty gritty of all of this, having this severe Kawasaki-like syndrome is exceptionally rare in children. Your best way to stay away from COVID is just to prevent from having it in the first place.
All right. So is this the same strain, or is it some kind of genetic modification that's causing this to happen with certain, a certain population of children? Because like you said, it's very rare.
Yes. So we're finding that it is very, very rare, but we can't have enough studies to say, does it affect someone with asthma? Does it affect someone with sickle cell anemia? Does it affect somebody with some other condition more than just a regular kid without any medical conditions? That's right. So what we do know is that they can have some problems and get this, but honestly, most kids who do get COVID symptoms end up in the mild or moderate category and don't require hospitalization.
Because I know a lot of new moms, especially who had COVID and then they had their babies, are very nervous about their babies contracting the virus. Is it seen in babies a lot?
Yeah, and babies that are born are in their first 6 months or so of life, they actually get a lot of protection from the mom's immune system, particularly if they're breastfeeding. So we always encourage breastfeeding in children from the beginning through as long as you want to give that. And if you're breastfeeding, you're actually passing immune properties forward. So if there was a mom out there who happened to get COVID while they were pregnant, they would develop these antibodies, and these antibodies are what helps you fight infections. And so when that mother is exposed to the virus again, then her immune system can kick up and probably fight the virus off pretty well, especially initially. But those same antibodies can get passed on to the child. And so that baby, once they're born, has a lot of the circulating antibody properties of the mother, particularly if they are breastfeeding. So this being the case, young babies can be protected if the mother had the infection.
Ah, interesting. And I just want to do a disclaimer here that we are not dispensing medical advice by any means. I know I am not, because I am not a medical professional at all, even though Dr. Jarret is. Please, please, please seek your own medical professional, your own doctors. If you have any symptoms or signs, if your children have any symptoms or signs, because we're not diagnosing anything. We're just giving out information here. So quick disclaimer, see your own pediatrician if you have a challenge right now or in the future.
I'll co-sign that.
Yes. So it's, and I know from having children, I know that that's something that we learned, when you're pregnant, and a pregnant woman with COVID cannot pass that virus onto her child because the blood is separated. So it doesn't,
That's correct.
it's not going to infect the baby while in utero.
That's correct.
So you don't have to be concerned if you do have any kind of symptoms about your unborn baby getting sick, because it doesn't, the baby stays separate. Isn't God good? Look how he just created that. And there's nothing that passes through to the baby through that process, any virus or anything like that.
Childbirth is amazing, and as many things that can go wrong throughout a pregnancy or delivery or shortly after, we're so fortunate that so much of our nature that's inherent within us allows childbirth to happen. In fact, I was very fortunate and was able to deliver my oldest son.
Oh, wow.
And this happened while my wife was in labor. She was pushing. We were getting ready. I was just in the room hanging out, ready to get my second child. And the obstetrician was sitting there getting her to push and said, "Oh, the baby's ready to come out." She stepped out the way and said, "Hey, doc, you're a doctor. You've delivered babies before. Why don't you deliver this one?"
Oh, wow.
So I said, I'm a pediatrician, number one. I
said,
that's right. I haven't delivered a baby since medical school. She said, "Don't worry, I'm right here. And naturally, it went okay. Baby came out, and he's still here with us today at 15 years old. So,
long-term damage from daddy.
Right. They didn't put the blame on me, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So Sebastian on YouTube said, "Well, women don't go through 9 months of construction work for nothing." And actually, right. 10 months, if you really count carefully, it's 10 full months.
You're right. We won't shortchange anybody on that.
Don't shortchange. 10 months. I've been nervous. Alicia, hi Alicia on Facebook says, "I've been nervous with my 11-year-old with asthma and kidney disease. We have a case of COVID-19 directly on my street currently."
Yes. So Alicia, and for those of you that do have cases of COVID in your neighborhood, and my neighborhood is no exception, we have to understand that the best thing that you can do is remain socially distant from each other. Everything that the experts are recommending, as far as wearing masks, as far as limiting your travel, as far as going from place to place, being around large crowds. If you're doing those things, it's going to be okay, because it won't necessarily jump from house to house to house to house to apartment like that, unless you're getting some exposure directly with a person. And we are learning more and more about it coming from these respiratory droplets and vapor that we exhale when we're talking or speaking or sneezing or coughing. So you're absolutely right to be concerned for your child, and every parent should be concerned to the point that they are trying to do the precautions necessary. So good hand washing, 20-second hand washing. In absence of soap and water, use hand sanitizer. That's okay. That's going to be your number one protection. Number two protection, wearing a mask when out in public. And number three is just kind of staying to your family unit. And I know a lot of you parents out there have really had some time to spend with your kids, because schools have been closed all across the nation right now. And you're spending your time as a teacher, you're spending your time as a school nurse, you're spending your time doing a lot of different jobs, and probably trying to work from home as well. And that is very difficult. However, even with your child with kidney and asthma issues, I would not say to do anything other than try to keep them physically isolated from people, and also try to keep them from having contact with people outside of your family unit. With time, and depending on the various parts of the country, these restrictions will be eased to a bit. But I understand your concern for your child, and the best thing, hand washing, wear a mask when out in public, and just remain physically distant. Here in the Philadelphia area, we just now started reducing restrictions on Friday. I think New York City was on there. So on the East Coast, we've been under these restrictions for a very long time, several months now. And There's starting to be light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not there yet. So still use precautions with your kids.
Thank you. Absolutely. We're, even though Florida's opened up a lot more, we are still not, my family and I, we're still not doing a lot outdoors. We're still staying for the most part indoors and to ourselves a lot. But the kids are getting restless. They want to see their friends. So
they really do.
And I wanna switch gears now. And thank you so much for all that advice. Yes, Alicia's in Maryland. And Sebastian says physical distancing, not social connecting. So again, I just want to remind everyone, you are watching the Audacious Confidence Show here on Dreamaniac TV. I'm your host, Alicia Couri, and with me is my guest, Dr. Jarret Patton. And we are streaming live. We're streaming live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Periscope. So we are switching gears a little bit because I did say I originally reached out during this time of the pandemic to talk to Dr. Jarret about kids during this time, give advice about that. But then something else happened. And I really wanted to talk to him about it because Dr. Jarret, as we move into the next segment, you are a well-respected doctor in your community. You're on boards, hospital boards, you are advisor to government agencies, and yet you were still wrongfully accused by someone of another race for doing something that you never did and suffered some really really crazy consequences for it. I mean, I don't even know how else to say that. But my question in all that, I was just giving some backstory. My question in all of that is, number one, do you believe that if you were the same race as this woman and you can tell the story if you like when you're answering the question, that your treatment would have been what you went through?
Wow, that's a great question, Alicia. And just to catch people up, of course, we talked a little bit more about this subject the last time I was on your show. So make sure you go back and take a look at the old show. But the short story in this case is that as I'm a physician executive, I'm the president of the medical staff. I am still taking care of patients as well as changing policy across the hospital system. I have a meeting with one of the hospital attorneys that I meet with quite often, but he looked really upset that day. And he just looked at me and said, Jarret, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're under investigation. I was taken aback and I'm thinking, what am I under investigation for? And he started taking pictures out of Facebook. Do you know this person? No. Do you know this person? Do you recognize this person? Do you recognize this person? And it was different pictures of the same woman that I didn't recognize. And he said, well, it turns out that you saw this woman's 9-month-old child a few weeks ago, and she's claiming that you were sexually inappropriate with her during the examination of her child, and she's going to the police. From there, my world changed. Next thing I know, they were slapping handcuffs on me, and the police led me into a paddy wagon as they were crushing the bones in my wrist with these steel cuffs. I'm sitting in a steel box of this paddy wagon being arrested and taken for processing. I did not get a chance to make a statement. I was never interviewed. They just said, okay, if that's what she said, then this is what we'll do. We'll do an investigation that didn't include me. And they went right to arrest. That led to a series of events, as you said, that I immediately lost my medical license. And not only Pennsylvania, New York, and other states, I lost my DEA certification from the Drug Enforcement Agency. I ultimately lost my job. I lost everything that I worked so hard for. And in that
On the
moment,
word of one person.
on the
On the
word
word of
yes,
one person.
yes.
And
And,
that's kind of where my question is if on the word of this one woman, all of your whole life collapsed. And if I know we can't say for sure, definitely, because it's, that's all speculation. But in light of what's happening now, and in light of the whole Central Park thing as well, where, I'm not going to say her name, but there's a whole bill now named after her, where she called the police and accused a Black man of attacking her when he was just standing there videotaping her for having her dog loose when she's not supposed to have her dog loose. So in light of that kind of environment, do you feel, this is just your speculation now, do you feel that you may have been treated differently had you been a white doctor with all those accolades and all those positionings? Would you have gotten slapped handcuffs and dragged away without even a question?
I think for sure, in my mind, that my race had a lot to do with it, because as a Black man in this country, having run-ins with the police is not necessarily an atypical situation. Throughout my adult life, from the time I went off to college, there would be maybe traffic stops or some other reason that a police officer would have to stop me. And it never led to an arrest. However, it did lead to me being detained. It did lead to me being out of the car and all of these kind of things. And it wasn't just once, like it was bad luck. It was multiple times throughout my life. And by the time I got to about 35 years old, I felt that I was old enough that these types of things would stop happening to me. Maybe I looked a little more professional. I looked a little more mature. I didn't seem like a threat. However, you're kind of left with this burden that's on you that many people may perceive you as a threat, especially if they don't know you at this time. And I have often thought about that. And I thought about Emmett Till as I was leaving the courtroom after my acquittal and my innocence was proven 18 months later. And I actually told some of the reporters there that, well, this type of thing has been happening to Black men for a very long time. And some of them have been documented in history, like Emmett Till, who was a 15-year-old boy in Money, Mississippi, who was alleged to have kind of catcalled a white woman in Mississippi, which led to a mob taking him up and killing him, essentially. And that is a well-known piece of history. But, these types of things happen often. So did I think all of this would happen to me? Well, no. I'm now in my 40s. I hadn't been pulled over by the police for quite some time now. And I'm thinking maybe I'm finally safe. So to directly answer your question, I think if my race was different, I probably would have had a different circumstance.
Because it was 18 months to prove that she was lying.
That's right. It took all of that time because it's easy for police and prosecutors just to put charges up there and leave it to let everybody else figure out what's the truth here. And there really was no evidence presented. It was just, stories, and the stories we were able to demonstrate in court didn't even make sense.
Any sense.
Yeah. And the jury ultimately saw that and they sent me on my way, but the damage was already done. I had, lost my job. I had lost my licenses. I was unemployable. And all of those things happened to me. It led me to say, you know what, if nobody else believes in me, I believe in me. Right. But luckily there were a lot of people behind me that believed in me, and that lifted me up so that I was able to go on to the next level. And that's when I started my own company and wrote my first book, License to Live.
Yeah. And like I said in your bio, faith and resilience really took you through that process.
Absolutely. If it weren't for family, friends, faith, there would be a different outcome, because a lot of people don't live to tell that kind of story. either figurative or literally. They may live literally and go on, but they may never be heard from again. So that's why I wanted to tell some of my story and let people know that, well, these types of things can happen to people all the time. And unfortunately, the way our system is run, all the penalties are given up front. I mean, by the day after I was arrested, the medical board was knocking on my door saying, let me have your license, before they even asked me any questions. So I really didn't get to make statements.
It's really guilty until proven innocent. It's not like innocent until proven guilty is just something that sounds good, but it's not what is reality.
That's not the reality of it. You really have to prove your innocence, which I was able to do.
Thank God you were able to prove your innocence. Last week, I had another doctor, Dr. Kieran Brown, on the show. And he also talked about being held at gunpoint by police at 13 years old, because he is, again, like, I guess you're 6 foot something. And, you know, yes, Jillian on YouTube says, thank God you found a way to prove your innocence. Yeah. Sebastian says, if you are a person of color, you are guilty first, innocent later, if you have the resources and legal strength to prove otherwise. It's true.
That's very true.
If you can hire a good lawyer to help you through that process, you know, who knows?
Right. They said, oh, why don't you plead for a lesser charge or plead for this? And then you're still left with, you know, having to carry all this baggage. It's not like I'm free from all this baggage. I mean, I still have, you know, reports on my national database and record, so people can look up all of that information, that it's there and it'll always be there. So I'm always having to explain it. That's right.
That's so unfortunate. And when I was talking to Dr. Kieran, he's here in Florida as well. And there are two things that I wanted to ask you about that too, is that Black men have become sort of a scapegoat too. So that led this woman to make that call in Central Park. And a couple of weeks ago, it led a mother who killed her son to blame it on 2 Black men before they even did really started investigating and realized that she's the one that did it. And there's video evidence of her doing it. Why do you think that Black men have become such a scapegoat in this society?
Frankly, I think that it ends up just being a believable story to most people. The fear of being Black or being a Black male, especially as you mentioned, I'm 6'5", I'm 240. You know, I'm a big guy. And when that happens, you know, people may perceive me as a threat simply because of my size. Put my skin color in it, you know, it's something that is always there. I mean, I've grown up my entire life with, you know, people getting out of the elevator when I get on, or people clutching their purse tight like they're about to get robbed by me. Or people being unnecessarily fearful of me simply because of what I look like. Particularly if I don't have on a suit and tie and I just have on regular street clothes, people have no idea what I'm doing. I don't wear my white coat around with me 24/7. So it's like, oh, wait, he's okay. He's a doctor. But this has just been an excuse that people have used time and time again. And for many people doing these investigations, they said, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, there's a lot of Black people in jail. There's more Black people proportionally in jail than there are anyone else. So yeah, that makes sense. So let's go with that story. And sometimes it's never found out what really happened.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people who are in jail who are like you were, wrongfully accused, and they're sitting in jail. And a lot of stories are coming out now. A lot of movies are being made about it now. And people are listening to it like, how is this even possible? Well, it's possible when you are first assumed guilty just by reason of color. You're just assumed guilty. So I want to make a little shift again. We're going to go into our next segment because as we're talking about being wrongfully accused, and like I said, I spoke to someone last week about being a Black man in America. What does that look like? What, and so I want to talk to you about that. But before we do, I want to just remind everybody, if you're now joining us, this is the Audacious Confidence Show here on Dramaniac TV. I'm your host, Alicia Couri, and my guest is Dr. Jarret Patton. And we are talking about, oh, that's the wrong banner. We're talking about being a Black man in America. And he's here with us. And we discussed his being a pediatrician. We talked about how that is affecting kids right now, the current pandemic. We went into him being wrongly accused of something that he did not do, and 18 months of pretty much hell he and his family went through to prove his innocence. And then now we are going to talk about being a Black man in America. We touched on it a little bit just now when you were talking about, why Black men are a scapegoat. But aside from the traffic stops that you have experienced in your adult life, what is it that you believe society as a whole, because I don't believe it's just police, that it's a culture in the police department. I think it's an overall culture in society. What do you believe is driving that? And then how do you feel like we can start changing the course?
Well, you bring great questions about this, because a lot of this has to do with systems and biases within the system. And we have to remember that all of these systems that we have today were founded way back when we claimed independence, and even before then. And under those circumstances, women had very little rights, and Black men had very little rights.
Well, Blacks on the whole. Being a Black woman, that was a whole other story.
That was a whole other story.
It's a whole other show.
And so you were only considered 3/5 man. Mm-hmm. On the books, you're 3/5 man. And so we really have to go back, all the way back, to understand some of the root causes. And so the systems that were designed to help people continue to be enslaved, to help people
set up prejudicial.
Remember, yes, that's right. Continue to be oppressed. These things happened over time. And now we're in a more modern society. We realize that, well, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. We're all human beings. However, we still have some of those same systems. And so you're right. It's not individual police officers necessarily. So there may be a few bad police officers that are rogue and doing some bad things and doing some damage. And that should be handled and addressed in their own ways, in their HR. However, the systems still have some biases, and they still leverage a little more weight against you by the color of your skin. So
because the system is what got you. It wasn't any individual police officer or it was the system that the way the system was rigged against you being a Black man accused by a white woman really was trying to take you down.
Yes. And that made a lot of difference in this situation. In fact, when you look at, where Black people have stood on the side of criminal justice, they've been on the short end of the stick for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And so people having to protest, people doing things to get themselves to say, okay, look, enough is enough. We can't just be having blatant murders in the streets anymore. We can't be having these overtly racist institutions, so to speak, really, just taking away people's rights and just not doing the right thing.
Right.
And this is where the change has to come. And now there are lots of voices because there are so many stories of these same things that continue to happen, whether people are being killed, whether people are being wrongly accused, whether people are doing, something else. There's enough of these stories now, and we have the luxury of videotape, because without the videotape, a lot of these things would have been buried a long time ago, just like they have been in years past. So we luckily have these cameras and video that people can see for themselves and say, there's something going on here that's not good.
As a Black man, do you feel like as a race, as Black people, that we are doing things to really hurt ourselves in the cause? Or, I mean, now we're doing all the protesting and everything, but is there something systemic in the way that we react to certain things that's hurting our cause?
Well, I think that in general, the answer would be no. That it's not individuals or individual Black people that are making this so that nothing ever gets done. It's again coming back to these systems that are very hard to fight against. And unless you are very influential or very wealthy, you may not get a voice. You may not get a seat at the table. And so this is why we must change things, across the board, and change our systems, whether it's criminal justice, whether it's healthcare, you name it. I mean, there's instances in racial differences in nearly every industry. We can talk about the banking industry. There's some things in there as well. So these systems are the things that we need to look at the change. So we need to get the information and say, why are there differences among races, and how can we address those?
Yes. And Sebastian had a comment, but even now people keep trying to change the narrative to riots, when the reality is system mistreats and abuses Black and people of color every day. It is a systematic thing. In my opinion, the wealthy Black people are also refuse to see the reality the ordinary Black person faces, that needs to be addressed in society too.
Yeah, and I think it could be on a couple of different levels, because if you look at the Black and the wealthy, we'll look at someone like Jay-Z. He's by Forbes, he's been rated to be a billionaire, and I actually wrote a blog about Jay-Z and how to become a billionaire, and most people will never do that. And you can find that on my drjarret.com blog page.
You're plugging yourself.
but
get it in.
The thing with Jay-Z, people will switch and do things for advocacy and try to do something very different, and say, okay, well, let's build a foundation and let's see if we can make movement there. And so he's been involved in a lot of justice initiatives. And him as an example of a wealthy Black person today, well, he wasn't always wealthy. He came from somewhere, and he had to build his way up. And he's had some knocks over the head in his past as well. So he can relate on that level. But then he has power and influence to do something else. And this is what a lot of people have to do. They have to stand up and use their voices. They have to use their ability to vote and make some changes as well. And you just have to be willing to stand up. And I think now is the time to do that.
My daughter, there's a comment from Lady Jacasso. What about starting from our homes and what we're feeding our children? After all, the home is the first institution of learning.
Excellent point, because as a pediatrician, I will definitely say that. In fact, on 2 Cents Tuesday today, we were talking about how to talk with your child about racism. And well, all of this stuff, it starts in the home. You need to be responsible for what you're teaching your child, the things that you say around your child that your child may misinterpret or even take literally. And there's a lot of teaching you have to do for your child even before the pandemic because, well, they are learning stuff in school, but there's a lot of other life lessons that parents
Yes.
have to be responsible for teaching their
Not just
children.
academic, not just academic. Pauline had a comment. Let's see if we could put that back up. She said, my passion is to create our future where we are all valued, our natural talents, and we have to make major systemic change in education and in business, as well as society, social equality and justice.
Absolutely. Great statement.
I have one more thing I wanted to ask you, because we're running out of time, and then I want to make sure I get to the new book. So don't let me forget the book.
All right.
So my last question I wanted to ask you is, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Well, it's taken a different meaning now. And people used to use that term as a divisive or maybe even another hate group, if you would, out there. But now people understand the fact that Black lives do matter, not in the sense of, well, Black lives matter more than any other life, but they do matter. And the reason we're talking about Black lives and why they matter is because, well, these are the lives that are being lost. They're being lost to injustices. They're being lost to inequities in healthcare. They're being lost to the jails and incarceration system. So these Black lives are the ones that are under the most distress. I mean, even for a Black man to apply for life insurance, well, they're in a much higher risk category, and you could be a 35-year-old or 40-year-old marathon runner who's Black, very healthy, has healthy lifestyles. And right. And because you're Black, well, you're at a higher risk than a 55-year-old smoker. So again, we're talking about systemic change, and we have to look at these things in very different ways. But Black Lives Matter is an exclamation point that, hey, let's not forget that Black people are dying out here, and they're dying unjustly. They're dying probably unnecessarily, and we need to make a change. So that's what it means to me. It's not a divisive cry, it's a rallying cry. And I think with these protests now that I've seen so many people of all different races out there holding these signs, people are just now finally getting it.
All right. So you have a new book coming out. Oh, let me just give a couple comments. Dr. Pauline says, life lessons are key, especially by parents. Yes, the parents are the first teachers. Lady Jacasso again says, parents take for granted the power they hold in forming these young, impressionable minds. So very true, because we have the power as moms, as dads, to really raise children up that are informed and that are sensitive and that want to see change. And I think that's what's happening now we're seeing the youth, because they're seeing that they have the power to affect change. And it wasn't as powerful as it was. Yes, I'm just answering. My producer just asked something. It wasn't as powerful as it was displayed when there was the shooting at here in South Florida at oh my gosh, why did that school just jump out of I apologize, but the mass shooting at Stoneman Douglas.
Yes. Yeah.
Marjory Stoneman Douglas. And it was the kids that rallied. It was the kids that got support. It was the kids that changed policy. It was the children. And I think other kids seeing that are now becoming aware. So our young adults are so much more aware of the power to change than any other time, I think, except from Vietnam, that they're seeing that they have the power to affect change.
There is a large sense of empowerment, particularly with our youth and young adults that are saying, hey, this is the time to change. And why not us? Why not us to stop the cycle?
Right. And I think that's beautiful. My daughter told me that Snoop Dogg just realized he can vote. So he's going to be voting in the next election because he just realized he can vote because he had a record and he didn't know that he was able to vote because he had, but voting rights have been restored to ex-offenders. Yes. So so anyone who's watching who's an ex-offender, go register to vote because you can vote now.
That is an example of systemic change.
Absolutely. Because because like you said earlier, there are so many more Black men in jail. When they are released and they have been rehabilitated and they're back into society, their rights were still denied. Their voting rights were still denied. And there was a huge population, and not just Blacks. We're talking Hispanics. We're talking anyone whose rights were stripped, voting rights were stripped, are now being able to vote. So go affect change, and 2 of my girls are going to be able to vote this year. So that's
all right. All right.
2 of my children will be able to vote. So let's hold up that book. Dr.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your new release, the release of your new book.
So my newest release is License to Live, Daily Affirmations to Rebuild Your Life. When I was going through my struggles many years ago, I realized that we talked about faith, family, friends, really helped get me through, but it was positive thinking. It was positive thinking and the power of positive thinking that helped get me going and going beyond. And so I wrote this book of 90 affirmations. It's written in a journal style that you actually do some reflection. You do a little bit of writing with it, but you are feeding your brain positive statements. And particularly in this time when there's so much negativity around us, everybody needs a little bit of positivity right now. So it was a thrill to be able to watch and write that book and do something to bring it out there. And I'm just happy to share it with the world now.
Did you wear that tie to match your book?
Well, both the book and the tie are part of my brand colors. So
there you go.
Maybe something with that. I don't know.
There. Jamal says great book. Jamal on where is he? On YouTube. And Lady Chicasso said, I truly enjoyed the show today. I'm empowered. Well, wonderful. Excellent. Sebastian says, maybe, just maybe, Jarret will come to my show in 2020, here hanging from the tallest tree, waiting for you, Dr. Jarret.
Sebastian, I'll be back. I'll give my promise live on air that I'm coming back.
He's not going to let you forget it. Even if he has to put me on a plane to come to Philadelphia and drag you.
Kicking and screaming, no!
Well, it has truly been an honor and a pleasure. And I'm so thankful that you came back on the show to talk about, this really, really important topic in history right now, not just with the pandemic, but you can talk on both sides of it. So not just with the pandemic, but also with Black Lives Matter and what's happening now. And we can be all doing our part to affect this change in society systemically, because it has to be in systems. And again, I don't believe defunding the police is any kind of answer. In fact, we need more training. We need more, we need changes in law. We need changes how the law is being written and executed. So, any last words, any last comments before I say goodbye?
Well, I'll just say, hey, if you're going through a tough time in your life with everything that's going on, this too shall pass. Take some time, take a moment, reflect, find your place in this whole universe. It's a huge universe. And then take one step forward. And that's what I'll tell you to do every day.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jarret. Don't go anywhere. Stay in the green room. I'll be just wrapping up the show and I'll come back to you. Well, this has been a really amazing, eye-opening and powerful show. I thank you so much for joining me tonight on the Audacious Confidence Show. And one of the things that I want to make sure that I highlight during this time I want to bring different perspectives here on Germaniac TV. We're doing it on all our shows at different perspectives on this issue. And so stay tuned to Germaniac TV for more. And I'm enjoying getting to hear other people's journeys and their perspectives on how they've experienced this culture and these injustices. And Jarret is a perfect example of someone who has just tried and worked hard at becoming someone who is a leader and giving back to the community, and then having one person try to destroy all of it. But with resilience, he bounced back. So thank you all for joining me tonight. And I want you to remember to, like he said, take one step at a time, but take that step boldly into your future with audacious confidence. And here on Germaniac TV, we say, you dream big, we make it happen. Good night. Love you guys. Mwah. Hi, Alicia Couri here. If you enjoyed that episode of the Audacious Confidence Show, check out more on this channel. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends. And if you hit that notification button, you won't miss a single episode.